Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you please take your seats at this time as the program will begin momentarily.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we're all set up. Thank you, Marcus, for introducing me, and thank you, all of you, for having me here today. I'm also very happy to provide a keynote here today, and yeah, definitely about reflection. Indeed, I will talk about the self and supporting self-regulated learning, and well, the self, that's mostly actually the learner or the student, him or herself, and that means I'm going to reflect myself on what kind of reflections our students and learners might have in different learning contexts. So it's twice reflection, I would say. So, well, when I was asked to provide a keynote, I started thinking about this topic, reflection, and what I wanted to say about it. And my work definitely connects to that. A lot of my research work is about self-regulated learning, how we can help students and learners to do that better. So I'm really interested in the topic, and I think this keynote is all about reflection. Reflection from me about the research that I've did together with a lot of colleagues on self-regulated learning and how to support it, but also the reflection that's in there, the reflection that the students made. So the picture on this slide, it's a picture I made in 2012 in Canada near Vancouver. I actually made it because I thought it was a beautiful picture, but it turned out that I used it as the cover of my thesis, which was about instructional strategies to support self-monitoring. Now, why did I do that? Well, here comes the reflection. The reflection of the trees in the lake made me turn around the picture to see if it still would be convincing to my eyes or whether I would feel the picture would be upside down. The reflection is not as good as a real tree, so it's quite easy to see that it's right like this. But still, there is a moment that you are a bit confused about it. You could be in doubt of what you're looking at because of this pretty perfect reflection. And I guess that's exactly what happens to many of our students as well. I think they often wonder what they're looking at when reflecting on their own learning. After all, you can only reflect on what you think you know about your own learning. So maybe I should have used an iceberg for the cover of my thesis instead. But well, that chance is gone, of course. So hold that thought and reflection and what we look at when we reflect, while we dive into self regulated learning and how to support it using technology. Well, first, to start and to have a similar reference, a frame of reference about self regulated learning, I want to show you this a bit simplified model of self regulated learning, originally by Zimmerman. And I'll quickly walk you through the phases because I think it's probably familiar to many of you. This model of self regulated learning has three phases: the forethought phase, the performance phase, and the self reflection phase. In this forethought phase, I would say that's the beginning. It's about goal setting, it's about making a plan, choosing your strategies, but also about thinking about yourself and about the beliefs you have about whether you can do it, whether you find it interesting, the motivational beliefs actually that you have about yourself and the learning task. Once this first phase is done, you're kind of done with planning, you go into the performance phase. This is where you actually start using the strategy you chose and you monitor yourself, you record yourself, you look at how things are going. Based on that, you go into the third phase, the reflection phase, self reflection phase. This is all about evaluating yourself. So, what happened in your learning process? And how do you provide attributions for that? Are you satisfied or not? So, it's all about reflection and evaluation. As you can see in this model, monitoring is really important. If you can monitor what's happening, if you can truly see how things are going, whether you're doing well or not, that's very useful. It's crucial even to reflect about what's happening and about what to do in the next cycle, because this model of self-regulated learning is a cyclical model which has iterations again and again and again. So self-monitoring really is the key. But it's easier said than done, and it's easier seen than done, I would say. I want to share with you this interesting study about learning from videos. It was shown in this study that learning from videos, which is very popular on many domains, topics, and in many different age groups as well, but learning from videos can cause an illusion of skill acquisition. So the more people merely watch others perform an activity like the moonwalk or throwing darts without actually practicing it themselves, the more they believe they could perform that skill, but actually they can't. They can't do it as well as they expect because they do not improve that much after just watching others, despite their own expectations. So, in this study, they show that extensive viewing of others allows people to track what steps they would need to take to do such an activity like the moonwalk, but they don't know how it feels when they actually perform it because they didn't practice. And this is causing this illusion. So, watching others doesn't directly say something about your own ability. And this causes a big problem for self assessment, self assessing whether you've learned something from that video. Well, and this nice study about videos doesn't only, the conclusion doesn't only go for watching videos and learning from videos, but we all know it's also true for learning from text. A lot of research has shown that learning without any additional instructional support shows that students cannot make very accurate judgments about their own learning. So their self assessments are also inaccurate mostly. And this was shown in adults and children. The same goes for problem solving, like math problems. We also see here that self assessments are not accurate unless there's additional instructional support. So self monitoring the learning process is difficult. And this is also causing problems to do the right thing in terms of regulation of the remainder of the learning process. If you do not know what you've learned or whether you understand something, it's hard to decide what to study next. Interestingly, although examples like video examples, but also other types of examples work well to learn new and difficult materials, they can also cause this illusion of skill acquisition or an illusion of understanding. So it's easier seen than done, and it's easier said than done. It's very difficult for students to self monitor their learning and make the right regulation choices based on that. This makes self regulated learning very challenging for most students. And this is often what we expect from our students. Often they have a lot of time in which they need to self study, or they learn in an online setting with a lot of autonomy, or they're doing their homework at home. Often there's no one to guide their learning process. So, this is an important issue. And also, wouldn't it be great if all students could learn how to self regulate their learning and set their first steps towards becoming lifelong learners? So, can we support self regulated learning? That would solve something, right? And yes, we can. We've seen many interesting studies. I'm just going to highlight some that were done by Steven Rijmakers based on earlier work by Danny Costens and my own studies, in which those video modeling examples, which can cause an illusion and make learner overconfident, these were used to develop help to self-assess and make regulation choices. So these modeling examples showed learners how to self-assess your own work and make the right regulation choices. These examples really help for students in secondary education to make better self regulated choices, and in this case, when solving biology problems. But there's a lot more. For example, if you look at generation strategies or generative strategies, if you use these strategies during learning, it can help to monitor and make more accurate self assessments. So it helps you to understand your own learning process. I listed some of these strategies, but I'm sure there's more. There's lots of these types of strategies that help. For these strategies that you can use for reading, like keyword summaries, but also self explaining using concept maps, diagrams, drawing, it was found that it really helps if you use these strategies because they focus the learner on the most important parts of the text. They focus the learners on information that is relevant to their situation model of the text. And that helps to make a better judgment have more accurate monitoring. Something similar happens if you look at the strategies for problem solving, like practice problems or completion problems or drawing. These strategies also help students to focus on the most important ideas about solving that problem. It focuses them on information about the mental model they're creating about solving that problem. And that information can help to make much more accurate monitoring judgments. There was a really recent meta-analysis that's really interesting that showed that this situation model approach or mental model approach was confirmed for self-monitoring when learning from text. So it's important to focus on that situation model or mental model. So that's very good news. There's lots we can do to help learners to monitor their own learning and become better at self-regulated learning. But these studies, or many of these studies, were done in classrooms or they were more or less controlled experiments with students in a lab. But there's also a lot of studies in online learning settings. And these are particularly interesting because often in those online environments, students are left to their own devices much more compared to traditional settings and much more to controlled experiments in classrooms or in the lab. So, what can we do online? Can we support self regulated learning online? Luckily, yes, we can. I just took a table from a paper written by Jacqueline Wang, in which she summarized, based on her review, what kind of approaches were used to support self regulated learning in online learning environments. In general, a lot of studies use prompting to help students actively plan, set goals, monitor their learning, reflect on their learning, but also integrated support systems supported these kinds of aspects. And feedback or a combination of feedback and prompts was also used often. Well, that's great news. In general, we know how we could support self regulated learning, even in online environments. But is this also the case in MOOCs, massive open online courses? And why would that be interesting? Well, we thought it was very interesting because in MOOCs, there's a lot of autonomy. And we also see that only a very limited number of MOOC learners manage to finish a MOOC. So apparently, it's hard to follow the whole MOOC and have a successful finish. So when we look at learners in MOOCs, on the slide you can see that you can say there's clusters of learners in MOOCs. These were identified by the studies mentioned on the slide and also brought together by Jacqueline Wang in one of her papers. So we can broadly categorize those clusters into three groups, depending on their engagement with videos and assessments in the MOOC. At the top corner, the top right corner, we have a group of learners who are highly engaged. You can see their perfect learner, completer, nearly there, late completer. But there's two learner clusters slight below these perfect learners. Moving down the line, you have the second group, and they're more diverse. You see the system gamers at the top left, and they only engage with assessments. And if you go down all the way to the right bottom, you can see the auditor group, which only engage with videos. And in the middle, you have these learners that are partially engaged, but they do not finish the MOOC or do not finish everything in the MOOC. And then, of course, the lower left corner represents this large proportion of online learners in MOOCs, those with very low engagement with the assessments and the videos, and they tend to drop out. So here you can see that some form of support for the learning processes, for self-regulated learning processes, is needed, apart from the perfect learners and the completers, of course. This support is needed for learners to take a more active role in their learning process and guide themselves towards completing a course, the course they freely enrolled in. So that's a challenge we took on. Together with Jacqueline Wang, we investigated if using weekly videos embedded in a MOOC to prompt learners about self-regulated learning processes would help them perform better in the MOOC in terms of self-regulated learning activities, but also in terms of their engagement and performance. So we used three conditions: one control conditions, which was business as usual, and two conditions in which the MOOC learners had access to a video which prompted self-regulated learning activities. One of these two had a video that had self-regulated learning questions only, and the other condition had a video with self-regulated learning questions and recommendations or tips. You can see them on the slides. So the left bottom shows the three questions and the right bottom shows the three tips. In these videos, there was an overlay to get participants to actively answer some of the questions in the video. I will show you an example of the video to give you an idea of what it looked like. The example is the video that learners in the condition with videos on self-regulated learning questions got.
Research shows that asking yourself questions about how well you're planning, monitoring, and reflecting on your learning will increase how much you learn during the course. So several times throughout this course, you'll be asked 3 questions about how well you're learning. Honestly respond to these questions by selecting the option that best reflects your learning state. Then use your responses to improve your learning during the course. So here are 3 questions to help you improve your learning. The first question is for you to think about how well you plan before you learn. So you ask yourself, am I setting goals to ensure that I have a good understanding of the course materials? The second question is about how well you monitor your learning. So am I concentrating on learning the materials in this course? Then the third question is about how well you reflect on what you've learned. So do I understand all the key points of this week's course materials? So to succeed, remember to ask yourself questions about how well you're planning, monitoring, and reflecting when learning in this course.
The results that we found in this study suggest that it is important that students make use of this SRL support. It helped them. We found that students who watched the SRL support videos showed higher self-regulated learning activities, course engagement and performance than students in the control condition. But interestingly, you can see that the learners who had access to those videos, so these are the learners in the self-regulated learning question prompt condition, which is in the middle column, or on the right, the self-regulated learning question and recommendation or tips condition. They did not all access the video. Here you can see process maps of the course activities that were completed on time over the 6 weeks of the course in which we embedded the videos. Completely on the left, there's the control condition and the other two conditions, one's in the middle, one's on the right. You can see that the darker parts are the parts where students were more active over the duration of the course. And it's quite small, so let's zoom in. But particularly, let's zoom in on the difference between the students who had access to the support videos, but then the difference between the ones who actually used the videos, watched the videos, and the ones who didn't. Here you can see on the left is the left represents the path that was taken by the students who did not watch any of the self-regulated learning prompt videos, even though they had access. And on the right, you can see the students who watched the self-regulated learning prompt videos at least once. You can see that students who did not watch these videos were active, but mostly in the first week, and none of them made it to week 6, which was the final week. Students who watched the self-regulated learning prompt video at least once were not only more active over the 6 weeks, but they also tended to follow a more sequential learning path across the weeks. This suggests that students who do not seem to use those self-regulated learning support videos might probably benefit if they would use the support. We can also look at this another way. Here on the slide, you can see the result of social network analysis visualizations. We use that to examine the transitions from one activity to another in the MOOC. The figures, they show the connection between the activities. And they show this again for the ones who watched the self-regulated learning prompt video and the ones who didn't watch it. A larger node, so the yellow circle, indicates a higher frequency of events. So although there were more non-viewers, more students who did not view the self-regulated learning support videos, the sizes of the nodes and the ties connecting them to other nodes, as you can see on the left, indicate weaker transitions among the different activities in the MOOC. So this suggests that those students who did watch the self-regulated learning support videos had more transitions of activities, and they were more interconnected than compared to the non-viewers. So similarly, the links connecting the nodes show that the self-regulated learning support video viewers chose the activities that are suggested in the MOOC, that adhere to the structure of the MOOC. And they do this more compared to the self-regulated learner video non-viewers. So these findings suggest, again, that those learners might have benefited from the self-regulated learning support, because if they don't watch it, they tend to have lower interactions with other activities in the course. So again, you could say, if you use the self-regulated learning support, it can help you, but you do need to use it. I see a question in the chat. What about pre-selection? Those that do watch are perhaps already better, more active learners. And yes, indeed, that's something we cannot rule out. So that's definitely a point to take into account. Another example I would like to use to illustrate the point that you need to use the self-regulated learning support as a student or learner, because otherwise it cannot help you, is from projects that I've worked on, in which we developed a mobile application to support self-regulated learning for higher education students. With the support of the Center for Education and Learning, ESSB, and the Community for Learning and Innovation and the Erasmus University as a whole, we were able to develop a mobile application to support self-study sessions for higher education students. And we used this application to study how we can support freshman students with self-regulated learning during their self-study sessions in their very first course. So they enrolled in the very first course, and we introduced them to the app by having tutors explain to them how to download and register, and providing them with the assignment to use the app for their self-study sessions and try at least 2 different strategies, preferably strategies that they didn't already know. And then somewhere during the end of the course, week 4 out of 5, there was also an assignment about reflecting on what students did in their self-study sessions and how they used the app or strategies, what they did, what worked for them and what not. So in the course, there was some attention for using the app. And we wanted to know if and how students use the app and whether that was related to self-regulated learning skills. To give you an impression of the app, I would like to show you a short video clip, but you can also, of course, download the app. It's free and available in the App and Play Store, but be aware you need a strong password and confirmation via email to register, so it might be a bit complicated to do it right now, but you're very much invited to do so. So here's a short video about the application.
We never stop learning. And when you want to achieve your goals, you have to study smart. Know which techniques work best for you. ACE Your Self-Study uses scientific theories to give the best advice on how to study. You can monitor your study activities and discover the best strategies for your personal learning goals. The Ace Your Study app is available for Android and iOS. So are you ready to max your learning skills?
So now you have an understanding of what the app was more or less about and how it worked. So back to the study. Out of 900 first-year students, just fresh at university, most of them for the very first time, 500 students decided to download the app. And about 300 actually had sessions with the app. So choices were made by students. You can also see that here, because here you can see the number of students on the y-axis who had a certain number of sessions. That's the x-axis. Clearly, most students who used the app only had 1 to 3 sessions. And this was during a 5-week course with approximately 30 hours of self-study per week. So they did have the opportunity to do more. So what did they do when using the app? In terms of the strategies they used, these strategies were offered in the application when they started their self-study session. They started with planning, setting a goal, choosing a strategy, setting the time, and then they went on to a performance phase in which they didn't really need the app, but they just worked on whatever they wanted to do in their self-study session. They used the strategy they chose, and then they went on to a reflection phase, which asked them some questions, and the answers were logged, so they had a log file of what they did in their previous sessions. So the strategies they chose in this first planning phase are shown on the slide. Note-taking was used most often, followed by summarizing and organizing and elaborate. These strategies were presumably already known to students, so the students mostly seemed to stick to what they already were used to. That also might explain why they didn't need as much sessions as I hoped, because they were doing things that were familiar to them. We wanted to know more about their experiences and their perspective on self-study sessions and using the app for it. So we had focus group interviews with students who were taking part in the first part of the study, that is using the app for their self-study sessions. And it did provide us with insights about their perspective and experiences with self-study in general, but also on the app and the strategies they used. On this slide, you can see some of the quotes of the students. For example, I only used the app twice because my study methods worked just fine. Or it was not clear to me why I should use the app. Or if I would have bad grades, then I would definitely use the app more. Or the last one, I only used it right before the exam. So this really shows us something about the reflection of these students on their self-study sessions. That goes for the next slide as well, because this is about using the app, and the next one is about strategies. So more about what strategies did you choose and why would you, for example, choose new strategies? A quote would be, if I would receive really bad grades, although I study really hard, I would like to try new methods. And they mean strategies. The next one, the strategies in the app are really time consuming. If there was no time pressure, I would try new ones for sure. So that's also the reflection about using strategies and about reasons to try something new or something different. And interestingly enough, the students in the whole study and also in these focus groups did not receive any grades yet in their program because they were first-year students in their very first course. But they do talk about, if I would receive bad grades, that will make me choose differently. So that's an interesting thing. It seems to suggest that students are using something else to really decide whether they need support for their self-study sessions, their self-regulated learning and strategy use. So that brings me to the idea of what is the self in self-regulated learning? Students do not always see what we would like them to see about their learning process. And that kind of takes us back to the beginning of this talk. It's really easier seen than done, or easier said than done. We know it's very difficult to accurately judge your own learning, to make accurate self-assessments. But you really need those to regulate choices, to regulate your learning, especially if you consider the self-regulated learning model to be a cyclical iterative process. We often overestimate ourselves, our students, our learners. They're usually overconfident. And that really complicates things when it comes to offering self-regulated learning supports, especially in those very open and online settings in a MOOC, or when you offer a mobile application where there's choice to download it or not, to start using it or not. A choice in a world with all kinds of priorities in terms of time, value, you name it. Overestimating yourself might mean it's hard to choose or to make the right choice in terms of using self-regulated learning support. So when thinking about that, I was thinking, so what do we need to do? What should we investigate, or what should we think about when designing our education and designing support for self-regulated learning? So I decided to put it like this: although it's nothing new, we should take the learner into account more. Their motivations, ideas about themselves, emotions, personality. And there are numerous studies on motivation, emotions, self-efficacy, self-regulated learning. But I think it's really important to realize that, especially in the context in which students have a real choice to click on that video, or download and use an app or not, or look at a dashboard or not. I think we need to do more to get students on board, to have them use self-regulated learning supports. Just offering support is not enough, at least not enough to reach the whole group of students in a context with a very high degree of autonomy. It's an interaction between what we design in terms of instructions, the affordances that technology can offer us, and these individual characteristics that learners bring with them. And I'm looking very much forward to the future to see what we can do to leverage those affordances of technology and the things we know about how to design our instructions to meet that individual learner and to make sure it suits them better. And hopefully that way it becomes easier to use supports to benefit from it. So that's really back where I started. The picture with the reflection of the trees. The reflection of the trees in the lake made me turn around the picture to see whether it would be convincing. Well, the picture's not upside down. It's just like this. The trees are reflected in the water below. And I think our question is, how can we best support our students to help them reflect and see what they reflect on and do that accurately? This brings me to the end of my keynote. Thank you very much for listening. I'm going to quickly look at the chat.